All right, I'm with Magatte. Wait, everybody, welcome to Walk-Ins. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Bridget. So happy to be here.
I'm so happy to talk to you. I mean, you and I have become friends at this point, and I am just so grateful that Nick Gillespie put us in touch.
Likewise.
And it was a minute before I could even respond to you. And then you are an insanely busy woman. Where are all of your efforts and focus going right now? Is there one thing in particular or many things?
It's at the end of the day, it seems like it's going to many things, but at the end of the day, it's going to one thing. And it's going towards the building for prosperity in Africa. And more precisely, what I'm focused on is on the rising tide that's going to lift all boats. So from that standpoint, it's I'm focused on one thing, but I attack it from a couple different angles. And so
what are the different angles you attack it from?
Yeah, so first is on the advocacy part. I think this concept of building prosperity in Africa. See, for many people, you say prosperity, Africa. Whether people realize it or not, it feels like a cognitive dissonance for them because I think it's two words that in people's minds don't go together.
Right.
So, but it's important to tell them that it is possible. And so not only advocacy in terms of how did we get there? How did we get to this place where Africa in 2024 is still the poorest region in the world? How did that happen? And most importantly, how do we get out of it? So the advocacy around the proper diagnosis as to why we are where we are today is key. And then from there, of course, working on solutions. So when you're asking me what are my focus on is advocacy, and then obviously it's on building of the solution. Or a solution. But I really think we're focused on the solution right now.
And what do you think it is fascinating how you said there's like the cognitive dissonance that occurs because Africa as a continent has become this in people's minds. It's just, what do you think people consider it? Is it just like the welfare countries? I mean, how would you articulate that?
I know. So again, we are currently the poorest region in the world. And then when you take, I like to propose this image or propose this experiment. And I even did it with a friend last time, not the 100 people, but so if I tell people, take 100 Africans or their allies, right? And take 100 non-Africans who are obviously not Africans, and you ask them, and not necessarily sympathetic to Africans or Africa, or no special feelings, good feelings. The group of Africans and their allies, you ask them, why is Africa the poorest region in the world to this day? And they will have what I call the usual suspects of reasons. And it's going to go anywhere from colonialism. Africa is poor because of colonialism. It's poor because of racism. It's poor because the West is stealing its natural resources. It's poor because racism, because, right? It's like all of those, these are the reasons why Africa is poor.
A lot of isms.
You got it. And in over here, you have people saying, those pesky Africans, the reason why they're still poor is because they're so lazy, the IQ fury. And so many people love to throw in your face the map of the IQ, the world map of IQs in the world. And of course, what do you expect with a 60, with an IQ of 60? You guys are just too stupid for your own good. Or, too lazy, always fighting each other, and you have it and you have that.
Yeah.
And both groups, another usual suspect that they have in common is corrupt leaders.
Right.
So corruption and corrupt leaders. That's that. That's it. That's pretty much for the most part, that's what it is. Go right now on my Instagram and look at one of our latest posts that's going viral. I think it's almost at 700,000 views. It's going to get to 1 million very soon.
Wow.
And it's this question. We have this question, and we said the IQ question. Why is Africa still poor today? And you should see the fights. There's more than 8,000 comments. And I kid you not, you take them all, they'll fit into one of those two sides that I told you about.
Right. Wow.
But do you know, Bridget, what I don't see? I don't see the reason why we're poor. I don't. What I don't see is people saying, because think about it. poverty is solved by prosperity,
Right.
not poverty alleviation. So poverty is solved by prosperity. Prosperity is built by entrepreneurs. What do entrepreneurs need? An enabling business environment. Hello, the
Yep.
free markets. Yet, when you look at various economic indexes, measuring how hard or easy it is to start and run a business anywhere in the world, you're finding that African nations are the ones where it's actually the hardest to start and run a business. Meaning that Africa is the most overregulated region in the world, meaning that its entrepreneurs have the least freedom to enterprise. But none of these groups says it. None
Right.
of these groups brings it up. And so I ask you, Bridget, how can you come up to the right solution if you have a wrong diagnosis?
Right. And why is it that they're so overregulated?
The reason why so we have to go back for this one in time a little bit.
Okay.
So the part of the history of the African history that most people forget is what was in Africa, what was going on in Africa before colonialism. Of course, there was an era of slavery, but before that, there was people moving around doing their thing. And I think for most of us, we don't think about the story of Africa except before that time. Right? Some people maybe think about the slavery time, but most people start with colonialism going to present day.
Right.
So now I have to take you back to during that colonialism time. So colonialism in most of Africa ended it started to end in the late 50s, early 60s. So Ghana was first to go to become independent in 1957, and then in 1960, a lot of them started just pop, becoming free, so-called
Yes.
free. My country was in April 4th, 1960. So
And your country is
Senegal.
Okay.
Thank you, Senegal.
Just, we hadn't mentioned it yet. So I want
Yes,
our
I know. I
listeners
take
to
it for
know.
granted. Everybody knows, but no, it's not. So now I want you to really take yourself back into that time, late 50s, early 60s. What was the world like? What was going on? So we were at a time in our in global history where you had two factions fighting an ideological battle.
Yes.
On one end, represented by the West, practicing capitalism as its economic system, facing off primarily with the Eastern Bloc, them promoting various forms of statism, and they're fighting these ideologies of fighting. And it's at a time, but if you remember, this is a time when most intellectuals, any so-called respectable intellectual back then, was a socialist,
Right.
a Marxist socialist. It was just the accepted premise that socialism is what works, capitalism bad, and we had the Soviet Union lying to people, claiming that stuff was working, when eventually we found out later that people were actually dying. This stuff never worked. But back then, that was not the given. The given was intellectuals were onto socialism, so anybody respectable was onto socialism. So that was, for example, what you were surrounded with. On top of that, you have now these, you have to remember that it was traditionally back then the Marxist socialists that have been fighting for racial equality. It was them.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that Marx was a noted racist, the Marxist socialists, we have to give it to them. For the most part, we're truly into racial equality. Okay? So, of course, our leader, these, what I would call the so-called liberators of Africa. So during those times when these two factions were fighting each other, looking for influence, looking down south, so for us, the Africans, we're thinking, look, these African liberators are thinking, the West is who has colonized us.
Right.
And there is absolutely no way we're going to side with them.
Right.
And also, on top of that, Marxism was the ideology en vogue. All the respected and respectable intellectuals were Marxist. And on top of that, the Marxists seem to have been allies for racial equality, for the fight for racial equality. And so you put all of these things together, plus the grievances that came from having been, colonized. And then you can see why we decided to attach our wagon to the Marxist socialist train.
Right.
And that's pretty much how most of free Africa started, with mostly Marxist and socialist leaders of all kinds. And then people were like, oh, some of us were not Marxist. I mean, look at Nigeria, it was not. Yeah, but Nigeria will claim that they were capitalist. But when you really look at what was practiced, you know, like everything has a spectrum.
Right.
Right? So if socialism ended right here, their capitalism started right there. So they were more or less still flirting with socialism.
Right.
Even
right.
as capitalists. We're still practicing the 5-year plan, very Soviet style. So in any way, that's where we inherited this ideology that eventually got transposed and manifested in our laws. And fast forward, because we never thought about revising that legacy from the colonial era, these ideas from elsewhere,
Right.
we never reconsidered them. And we all know Marxist socialist ideas have never built prosperous economies.
Right.
To this day, right? And so
It's
when
never been tried.
It's never been tried, but we all know it's never been tried right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's pretty much how we, at a very crucial time of our lives, meaning getting into our independences, we also sided with a wrong ideology, which fast forward got us to where we are today. So I
Right.
make the argument that Africa is poor today because it is the hardest place in the world for entrepreneurs to enterprise. And then people are like, oh, neocolonialism. What they mean by neocolonialism is the fact that all types of countries interfere with our affairs.
Right.
Are there interferences? Absolutely. But is it the reason why we're still poor? No. And I argue that it's because we are still poor that it's easy for others to interfere in our affairs.
Right.
Right.
Right. And it seems now, as you kind of point out in your book, even training workers, and it's now you're just behind in globalism because you really haven't been allowed to compete. And so, as you mentioned in your book, you had to be patient.
Yeah.
And this is something I think, again, puts you at a disadvantage. And like you said, puts the African countries at this place where now I see China kind of everywhere.
That's right.
And it seems like I hope that this can turn around before there's even more interference. Growing up as a child in America and the West, the mantra you hear when you don't finish your food is there are starving kids in Africa.
That's right.
And I wonder what this does to your perception of, like you said, it gives this idea like it just permanently, and I grew up with all those videos that my husband Jared and I always talked about, like they were so upsetting. We couldn't even watch them.
Yeah.
But it did kind of emblazon in my mind this idea that it's just a poor continent.
A poor, and I would use some words that I've had people use in front of me. It's a poor, God-forsaken land.
But it's not.
I know.
Like when you go, even going to South Africa and you fly, first of all, it's way fucking bigger than people even understand. Even going, when we were flying from across when you go to South Africa from France, which I'm sure you've done many, many times, it is an insanely long flight.
Very long. Very long.
You're going over like the whole Congo, and I was like, "Oh my God!"
That's one of the largest.
It's massive.
Not the largest country on the continent. Yeah.
Yeah, I never really sleep well on flights. Everyone else was passed out. This was during COVID, and I was outraged about the way that South Africa was being punished for just discovering the South African variant. And so they canceled all our flights. I'm like, we're still going.
That's right. Good for you. Good for you
we
and
were
Jared.
the only 3 people. Like there were 4 of us on these long hauls. You know how cavernous that must have seemed.
And the planes are huge. Yeah.
And flying, I was like, this is insane. Just watching the little map, I'm like, you don't really get the sense that Africa is as big as it is.
Huge.
And you mentioned this in your book.
Yes.
Even just on the way that it's represented
it's
on
wrong.
a
Most
map
of the maps
is incorrect.
Most of the maps are incorrect.
Yeah.
Most of the maps are incorrect.
Yeah.
Because
so,
if it was proportionally displayed, we would be like this.
And I had so many moments being like, this is God's country. I mean, we got to do stuff that because we were with people who were working in the parks, we were able to do things like the minute you get there, it's like Jurassic Park. They're like, and Kruger especially, it's like, don't get out of the car, whatever you do.
Because it's real.
And they're dropping us off helicopters like in the middle of the park. They're like, we'll be back because they had to do a maintenance run. We were living with the workers. So we got to do stuff like locals got to do.
Very nice.
And it was like, I mean, the first night we were there, we had, we went into like a river. It had been raining. And they're just like schlepping out into this river. There are elephants down the way. We're deep in the bush. I was like, this is fucking gorgeous.
It is. It really is.
It's God's country, though.
It's God, where people want to see God-forsaken land, I see God-blessed land. It really, truly is a blessed land. And it's just the fact that we have not been able to accomplish as much as we could accomplish, not because we're stupid, lazy, or whatever. It's just because the institutions that allow for flourishing just have not been put in place.
Yeah.
And it's all it is. If you change that, everything else follows. And there's nothing special about us Africans. There's nothing special about the Singaporeans. There's nothing special about Dubai, the Dubaians. There's nothing, I don't even know if we say Dubaians, but there's nothing special about the people of Dubai. What you have is environments that enable wealth creation and human flourishing.
Yeah.
And environments that don't.
Yeah, I mean, Singapore, I think, is a pretty good example,
That's what they did.
too. Yeah. I mean,
exactly. And I think we tend to forget that. That's why I have so little patience. And I'm so upset at the people who like to, at all of these distractions, all of these usual suspects I talked about, whether it's racism, colonialism, whatever you have here, lazy, IQ, whatever you have here, it's all distraction. It's all distraction, keeping us away from focusing on the real culprit of why this continent still has not, self-actualized.
Right. What do you make of, and this was a crazy thing about being in South Africa is the countries have kind of, particularly South Africa with apartheid. What do you make of, I guess, what do people always there talk about, like Zimbabwe? What happened with Zimbabwe?
Well, what happened with Zimbabwe is at some point you had, their president, who, his name is going to come back to me in a second, but he decided, just like, so Zimbabwe and South Africa had this in common, where Zimbabwe was not necessarily an apartheid nation,
right?
Where South Africa was. But in Zimbabwe, though, for various historical reasons, a lot of the people who were doing very well in Zimbabwe happened to be white farm owners.
Right.
Right. So they, in some sort, they had that similarity with South Africa. And so what the president of Zimbabwe decided to do, he was very much a nationalist, very much in the same vein with the what do you call them, the liberators of Africa that came before him. And he decided that he is going to, this is not right, this is not fair. So we're gonna take the land back from white farm owners. And so that's what they started doing. Now in South Africa, what they're trying to do now is there's a strong push for we're gonna take the land back. So take the land back. Some people are saying, we hope you're gonna provide reparation for this, or whatever. So these are the fights that you're having right now. And the reason why the South Africans are saying, look over to Zimbabwe, this shit doesn't work, taking the land back from the white farmers who have, grown these into great businesses. And Zimbabwe was known to be the bread basket of Africa, right? And so, but it got destroyed through that process.
Okay.
Through that process, it got destroyed. And Zimbabwe is where it is now. I mean, one of the most, way poorest nations on the continent. And so that's what the South Africans, when you hear them say, look to Zimbabwe, that's what they mean.
Right.
That's what they mean. Because they're trying to go down that direction of let's take the land back, let's take everything back, let's give the land back to the blacks, blah, blah, blah. And saying, well, whatever the whites were able to do, we can do the same thing. So for me, it's not a matter of being white, being green, being yellow. It's a matter of, we all have different expertise. Not that black people couldn't be great black farmers,
but it's
just like you'd exactly,
yeah.
Just like everybody, it's not just because I come and, you did well, at something. And I'm like, well, how come Magatte didn't get it or whatever? And, we think it's just because Bridget had to had the land and blah, blah, blah. So now we're going to give her the land and Magatte is going to become as good as Bridget was. Except that, well, what do I do with this, right? And so that's what happened. And so that's why you're hearing them talk a lot about Zimbabwe.
And were farmers murdered? Is this overstated?
No. Some horrible things happened.
Okay.
There has been...
it's always hard to tell. I'm like, is this real? Is it overinflated? Is it underinflated? Is it reported at all? I never really know.
Yeah. No, what you had is farmers literally, attached to the trunk of a tree on their farm and made to drink desktop. I can't even, I don't think you even want to imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely lots of horrors happened.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think us, the human species, that's what we have in common. I don't care what skin color you are, which religions you are. I think we all have the ability within us of the absolute worst.
Yeah.
Absolute worst. So
this is something Jordan Peterson talks about a lot. And I think it's like you have to be comfortable knowing that we all have that darkness.
Oh, we do. We do. And I think it's very easy for those of us, for it's you or me, surrounded by the comfort of the peace that we get to enjoy, to be like, oh, we'll never be that. But I argue that we will never know what we're made of. None of us will never know what we're made of in our guts. Are we made of the cloth of heroes, or the cloth of cowards, or the cloth of murderers, whatever? Until we're faced with a reality of this is it. Which way do you go? So I'm very cautious. I would like to believe, and I hope God helps me that day, that I will make the right choice, the honorable choice when push comes to shove. But I argue that none of us knows what we're made of until we are faced with it.
You hear a lot about this even from like Holocaust survivors, and just how there's this expression. I forget who said it, but it might have been the guy who I'm blanking, Viktor Frankl. But in Man's Search for Meaning, it might have been him who said it, or it may have been someone else. But there's this idea like none of the good ones made it. There's like, it isn't like the good ones that made it out.
Yeah.
And it's like,
That's
you
right.
don't know what you're going to do in those situations. You don't know. Most people have no idea what it's like to be starving.
That's a thing.
And how.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
That's a thing. And so, and I think also when you're faced with a propaganda, so Robert Mugabe, that was the president of Zimbabwe,
Yes.
who did all of this. And I think when you're faced, I God forbid any of us to feel the level of hatred and the feeling of injustice. And this is also why I have such a problem with, again, these usual suspects, because I think that's what leads you to situations like that. If we had understood that the free market is really what's needed to lift all boats, the rising tide that lifts all boats, then we would focus on that. But no, instead, Mugabe is a known socialist. So how can you be a socialist and then you expect through your socialist, policies to build any prosperity? No,
Right.
you're not. But at the same time, these are the same people feeding and brainwashing, their people at least, of, the only reason why we're here is because of the racism of these white people that are keeping us out of the means of production. Is some of that true? Probably. There's also a lot of white racists in these parts of the world.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't mean that it's all doom and gloom for the Black Africans. It doesn't mean that. It just means that let's get to be much more serious in terms of the policies we put in place. And so you see, where often I think we have it wrong is this idea that we always think we have to take from Bridget to give to Magatte, or take from Magatte to give to Bridget, rather than how can we also make sure that in this case Magatte, gets to partake in. So the minute you think the idea is to take something from somebody, even if it's a hair of yours, the only time it works is when you decided to take that hair from your head and give it to me. And even there, I argue that's probably not going to solve my problem because, handouts have never solved anything. But it's definitely better if you decided on your own to make that handout to me. You won't have a resentment that you would have if it felt like it was forced on you. So oftentimes that's what they do. It's this attitude of, instead of trying to think about what can we do for these people to also be lifted up, we always think it's a matter of taking from J to give to X.
Right. It's like this idea of scarcity, essentially.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Instead of creating a bigger pie that we can all share from, you're just saying, this is the shape of the pie, and we've got to just redistribute it so that everyone gets equal amount.
That's right. And for me, at its heart, it's the biggest difference between Marxist socialist and capitalist, right? Free market capitalist. One is live in a world of abundance because they know how to build abundance. We know that the pie is not fixed. We know we can grow it. We know we can grow not only this pie, but create another one here, create another one there, here do something different. It's just a world of abundance because we understand that the human spirit and the human capacity is infinite, given the proper environment. Where these guys, I think, at the most fundamental level, they don't have a belief in that. And I would argue also they're led by a feeling of hate rather than a love of humanity. They're led by a hate for I think hate for the optimist. At the most, I guess at the most radical level, it's maybe a battle between optimists and pessimists. And with and pessimists, I don't know if you've seen many pessimist people in your life, but the pessimists not only refuse to imagine a better world, but they're also resentful towards you for daring to even envision a better world.
Yeah.
And I think there's something there.
I know this, though. Again, this is something we all battle within ourselves. I think if you really get down to it, as an addict, I'm very familiar with like the idea of even when you go into 12-step in recovery and it's like all the platitudes and all these people spouting all this like recovered, and you're like let go and let God, and I'm like, let God what? Like pay my rent?
I can only imagine you.
Oh no, I was the worst. I mean, I remember seeing someone when I took my 2-year chip, and they were like, "Wow, you made it to 2 years. You had the worst attitude. You were like a goth chick." I mean, I must have been horrific because I didn't want to hear. And now I'm married to a man I met in recovery, which I would have absolutely laughed at in your face. And my life got so big, but the amount of I was so resentful that at all of the people who I felt victimized by in my life. I wanted to blame everyone for why I got there. I was resentful that I had to quit drinking. I was like, why can't I just drink normally? Screw you, Ireland. In my Irish jeans or whatever.
Jeans? Even your jeans? Oh my God, you went down. Ireland, okay. And I was like, what do we have to do with this? You've never even lived here, girl.
Like, some of us can handle our liquor, lady. Like, none of you can. You don't think you can. None of you can.
Oh my God.
No, I mean that there was like I was so deeply resentful that I wanted to take the joy from anyone who was in recovery.
Wow.
It was like, and this is something I see in recovery that I have come to understand, but also I don't like it when people go out and they're like, I'm just going to try and drink normally or whatever. And people in the rooms will be like, well, they'll be back or they're going to crash their car. I'm like, my sobriety isn't dependent on other people being sober.
That's right.
It can't be reliant, because that seems very resentful to me. Like wishing, you should wish them well, even if they're not in this. You don't need them to be sober for this to work for you.
That's right.
It's a very,
That's
but
right.
I get that.
That's
I
right.
totally get it. I
That's
was
right.
there for like 2 years.
2 years.
And it led me to some really dark depression.
Oh, wow.
Which I think you seem familiar with, kind of walking up to the darkness within. And this whole podcast was started because, and I think you are such a perfect like ambassador for our time, because there was all this conversation around victimhood, and it's like, oh, we live in this victim culture, and then you'd have all these dudes talking about like, I'm the victim and the woke and the blah, blah, and the like the woke victimhood, and it was just like this circle jerk of talking about victimhood. But I'm like, how do you can fall into the trap of talking about the problem, which is, I think we see this on the left and we see this on the right, and it's much easier to sit around. And I think one of the quotes you have in your book, I love all the little, like, what are they? Just
Proverbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of them was about sitting and talking is easier than coming up with a solution.
That's right. That's right.
And I do think that we can all fall into that trap. I can fall into it. And so I started this podcast because I'm like, I want stories of resilience. That's what people need to hear. They need to hear stories like yours of entrepreneurs who have failed and who have lost their shirts and gone bankrupt and suffered horrific loss and still returned to fight another day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's the thing. It is so easy, I think, to fall into victimhood. It's our easy default setup. It's our easy default setup.
Why do you think that is? Is that always like, is that humanity's default, or is it just, it seems to me, because my grandparents were not like their greatest generation. They were just like, love every day, be grateful. They seem to have a very different mentality.
I think it's the key word right there. That word gratitude. It's the key word. When you feel like your today is definitely better than your yesterday, when you're very aware of that, you cannot not feel gratitude. Even if you don't know what gratitude is or feels, you feel it every day. Every day. When you see that your child is going to be like today. I think our grandmothers, our mothers, our great grandmothers, I think we started losing this at our mother's level. And I will go into that in a second. But, when you have these grandmothers who have seen, the arrival maybe of the what do you call it? The washing machine.
Yes.
And how much liberation that brought to women. When you see, I don't know for you, but every day I come out of my nail place, and having been, with my nail technician, her name is Tina. She's amazing here in Austin. And so I love Tina. She's today this single mom. She's originally from Vietnam.
Yeah.
And she put her son through engineering school, one of the best ones in the country. And it's thanks to these manicures and pedicures she's been doing. I'm also part of her journey as a faithful and loyal customers of hers. But she earned it all by showing up every day, always doing the best job. I mean, Tina, when she's done with my nails, she looks at it like a piece of art.
Yeah.
And she really did
They
art.
always do look amazing, by the way.
Thank you. But Tina is so proud of her work. And when I walk out of there, not only Tina, I know this was true liberation for her. She's, putting her child through the best schools. She loves her boy. And me, when I walk out of that shop, I'm also feeling I feel the gratitude of being also a free woman.
Yeah.
There are women who, believe it or not, but you see, for people like me, it's not lost on me. I know that there are women who are not even allowed to put nail polish on. I know that there are women who are not allowed to, when it's not their choice, who are not allowed to let their hair show. And maybe I come from parts of the world where, you still see some of these things. So you take it, you don't take it for granted. I walk out of there and thank God I don't have a husband who is like, How much did you spend there? What did you do? Nothing like that. On the contrary, he's happy because I'm happy. So I think it's all of these little things of life that we don't understand how far we've come. When I take an airplane and that thing is lifting off this mammoth, which is a feast of engineering.
I know. I have this
It's a
thought
miracle.
every time.
It's a
And
miracle.
now everybody shuts their freaking windows because they want to look at their stupid screens.
There
And
you
I'm
go.
like, can we please,
There you
on
go.
like takeoff and landing, open
There
the
you go.
windows? I beg you,
There
humanity.
you go. There you go.
It is so annoying to me.
There you
I'm
go.
like, when did this become the norm? I actually
right.
appreciate when airlines are like, for takeoff and landing, we have to
Turn
open
it
the
off.
windows.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
you have the
like,
windows.
I feel
Yeah.
like they say that, but it's just because it's still like a marvel.
It's a marvel.
And people are like, these planes are falling out of the sky. I'm like, it's a miracle. We
It's a
take
miracle.
it for granted
Yeah.
that they don't
Miracle.
more often.
No, 10,000 planes in the air every single
It's
day.
crazy.
And yes, of course, you're going to hear about the one that something happened. It's always one tragedy is always one tragedy too many. Don't take me wrong.
Always.
But come on, guys, in the grand scheme of things, how far have we come? I can tell you, I don't know for you, Bridget, but as a Black woman, I would not have wanted to be alive in any other moment in life than today. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But if I look between where we started, where, our humanity started, and where we are today, you ask me, Magatte, which time do you want to be alive? I'm picking today.
Yeah.
I'm picking today. And if you ask me why, then just even having to remember that why, it shows you all the progress we've made. So I think, the problem is we have lost sight of the progress we've made. That's for those of us who even know about the progress we've made.
Right.
And the rest of us have no idea that we've made progress. When I hear people saying, oh, our society has never been this violent. No, society has never been this peaceful.
Yeah.
And so I think, the problem is we have a very poor understanding of our history, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, we have become spoiled brats.
Yes.
And for that, especially on the women's side, on the women's issues, because I believe our women's issues are men issues. I don't care people getting on my case for genderizing things. Women have their issues, men have their issues. They might be different.
Ayan says this. She says, basically, you can judge how healthy a society by how free the women are. But I think the women now are so free. And there's this whole talk about feminism. Like, we should be working for these other women who don't have what we have, not worrying about, like, it's so crazy to me. There's this conversation like, where have the feminists been when they're talking about like the hostages in Israel? And it's like, the feminists abandoned us long ago. If you talk to women like Yasmin Mohammed or Ayaan Hirsi Ali, women who should be fucking icons of feminism, they've been abandoned long ago by feminists because it's not about feminism anymore. It's about power or something.
No, it's very true. And I will tell you one thing. For me, the women, especially this whole phenomenon we're talking about.
I'm only laughing because I shot dumpster fire this morning, and my big message was "Get these hoes out of Congress." Because did you see like the cat fight?
Yeah, no, I mean seriously, that was so embarrassing.
I know.
And then the guys there too were almost like,
you can see on their faces, like these
They'll never
bitches are
respect
fighting.
us. I say this is why we can't have anything nice.
Yeah.
No, seriously. And then the shit that these women were coming up with, I'm like, really, seriously?
No,
but
it's so embarrassing.
But you know who I blame, Bridget? I blame the feminist. It started more or less with 2.0 ladies, and then 3.0 went batshit crazy. But 2.0, when they started to peddle this idea that women can have it all. Women can have it all. That to me was the weirdest thing because it was totally not understanding the concept of trade-offs.
Right.
And that men have different trade-offs, women have different trade-offs, primarily due to biology. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it's just trying to accept and understand what it is that you want out of your life, and also working within your possibilities and also your limits, and understanding trade-offs.
Yes.
And I think we have made women think that there was no trade-offs in this world, and that you can have your children, when you wanted to have them, be as healthy as you wanted to have them, maybe even have a normal pregnancy. You can wait till you're, I don't know what age, and still have them and do the whole 9 yards. When I'm sorry, but reality is a bitch, and it doesn't just work like that. So we've been told all of this stuff, but I think, and then I think what happened is these same women who've been told a lie eventually came to understand that was a lie at some point, because reality catches up.
Yeah.
And I think there is this whole generation of so there's a generation that sold this madness to women a whole generation who bought it and drank the damn Kool-Aid. And then eventually those feminists, I think 2 years ago, started coming to the point where they're now realizing all of this is a lie. And now I think there's anger and resentment that's coming from there.
Yeah.
And there's a reason in my mind why it's happening primarily with white liberal women.
Yeah, they're a problem.
Because they're a big problem. If you ask me, Magatte, who's your biggest problem? I'll tell you it's a white liberal woman. They are. They're just something needs to happen with these women.
I know.
So I think it's them.
We're the Republicans, all right.
Well, but it's them who bought that stupid Kool-Aid, drank it, and then turned around a few years later, realized it was not true. When you have women who are telling you, well, now I'm in my mid-40s or I'm in my 40s, and I realized it was all a lie, but I never managed to try to find a spouse, or worse yet, in her case, having kids, and she's just like, right now I'm in detox mode of unlearning what I was taught. So I think those women are the ones who are causing a lot of problems right now, because instead of dealing with their resentment and the anger, I just feel like it's just letting loose actually the anger and the resentment.
Yeah, and I was talking about this with friends. If you think that resentment is bad, wait until the resentment from all of the girls who have been taking like testosterone and now have problems that are irreversible. Like, wait until that resentment comes to fruit.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a friend who she's kind of a left UG who moved here. You should definitely meet her. And she I think she's the one who calls herself a left UG, which is hilarious.
I love it.
And she was saying the first time I ever heard someone refer to it as a woman's penis or something like that, or his I forget exactly. The first time I ever
heard
one of us,
her penis or his vagina. Yeah.
The first time I ever heard her penis, I thought to myself, "There's going to be a war over this," and I was like,
and
"It's
here we are.
not completely irrational because there's so much resentment in the culture." And you and I were talking about this last night. The like war of the sexes right now is so toxic. It's just toxic for everybody, and I don't know. My big question that I have is, how do we help millennials, Gen Z, Alpha, how do we help them come out of this victim mentality that, as you're, rightfully pointing out, is a default?
Yeah. I think I've thought about this for a long time, just because being an African woman, we have a very different attitude in terms of men-women relationship. And one of the things that, by the way, it's so funny because this is another common thought out there that's completely wrong. When people think of African women, they think that we're these subdued women who, they think they think about, especially there, the men are like, the women that don't have rights or whatever. And I want to remind to them, actually, in African culture, many of the African cultures had a matrilineal cultures,
right?
Meaning that I keep my last name. I'm not taking my husband's last name. I still am Magatte Wade because I don't take my husband's last name. We don't take our husband's last name. That's how, even there, when you, normally in your culture, it's like you take your husband's last name.
Yes.
We don't do that.
I didn't take it.
And also, there you go. And you have many societies also where it's all based on the women. When you hear this thing about the queen mother, it's a concept that very much comes from the Africa side. Because you had a lot of these tribes where the queen mother, the mother of the king, no decision is made without her consent.
This is going to sound so dumb and embarrassing to even admit out loud.
Tell me.
But I never thought of African women as anything less than queen mother. And it's because of that movie Coming to America.
Okay, well, you see, thank God for such movies,
I was
right?
obsessed with it, but the mom was like, she was the queen mother.
She's the queen mother.
Yeah.
She's the queen mother. And you see, and also the African women, the way they do things, many African women are exquisitely, feminine. I mean, you go to Senegal, all that, even the ones who don't have much, I mean, there's such demeanor. They embrace their femininity. And so for us, the way of being a strong woman is not by castrating a guy. None of us wants a castrated man. If anything, we like for our men to be strong, in public and all of that. We want that, and we support them. You'll have women, whoever wants the breadwinners of a family, but you would never know it because she is definitely providing from behind the scene, making it look like it's coming from him, because, understanding that he's need that dignity of a man or whatever, and there's absolutely no problem with that. Where they fix their issues with men is in the bedroom, right at the perfect time when you're like, anything you tell him, he'll say yes.
Yeah.
That's when you deal with some of his big issues, right? So, but in public, darling, you're it.
Yes.
So you see, it's so different from us. So for me, when I see it,
even that is blasphemy, by the way. Even to say that is like it's.
But who's the happiest? But who's the happiest? I would think, right? And so. And plus, everybody needs to do what suits them. But don't do something and come bitching the next day about it. That's just what I have a problem with. Do you, whatever that is. But just don't come the next day complain, because that's really not my place. So going back to this thing, being from Africa and very much being in that tradition, I'm a strong woman. I mean, I think anybody who knows me, that's the first thing you notice. But the thing is, it doesn't come at the cost of me, needing to castrate anybody or anything like that. And my fellow sisters in many African, societies are pretty much the same way. And I think what it is that in societies like mine, we very much have embraced that there is a powerful way of being a human being, and that it can differ from when you're a man or you're a woman. So for us, what always struck me is why in America, especially in the, what's her name? The lady from Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg. And that whole Hillary thing. And for them to be a strong woman is these stupid pantsuits. I'm like, what the fuck is that all about?
Ugly.
What
I
the
don't
fuck?
know.
And I'm just like, so for you to be a powerful woman is to be a mutant. Mutant as in looking like a man, being like a man, behaving like a man. What happened to the feminine, power? That's very different from the man power. Let the men be men, whichever way they think. And what is our ways of being powerful? And so I think we've never embraced that. And so we've spent our whole time being powerful in the way that men have, modeled it. And then what do I see? Mutants walking around. Mutants, a bunch of mutants. And I'm like, wow, just wow. So in doing this, you're giving me the proof right here that men are superior. So superior indeed that we have to monkey them.
Yeah.
We have to monkey them with these stupid suits that we wear, and you go into boardrooms and you have to act like this, and and you can't even show that you're preggo or whatever, anything like that. And it's like, nah. And I'm going to have to be able to take these trips and travel, even though my daughter is waiting at home and needs to be breastfed or whatever. Showing any of that is being weak, showing emotions. My whole team with Startup Cities team, the whole team is men. They're all men. They're all men. It's not, I don't think that shows it that way, but you see in the meetings, I have absolutely no problem. I always use the words, I feel, my instinct, I feel.
Yeah.
And if they're going to disrespect me for that, then it means they're not my people.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing wrong, because there is, I think is a power, but I feel, and my instinct is another power.
And we need both energies, it's, and the problem now too, I see is like so much ends up getting blamed on the woman. Like the thing about the abortion debate that always drove me crazy is I'm like, why is it always 100% centered on the woman? We never even talk about men. It's like bananas to me. Just can we at least include them as 50% of this problem? Not just like, it's always like the woman and the woman and the woman.
That's
and
a good
now
point.
as you have this kind of, the female energy, I think, rose. And there is something, I think Oprah was the one who said you can have it all, but not at the same time. And I keep hearing this over and over. And I think it's true. And even my husband and I were talking last night when he was like, what about the book? And like, why don't you write it? I'm like, look, trade-offs. Like, I have a kid now, and sure, can I squeeze some more time to write a book? Could I maybe get up earlier? Maybe. possibly there might be some ways, but right now it's like I'm choosing to put her down for a nap because I know this is not forever.
Yes.
And that is a more important investment to me and like, if I, will I be upset if I don't write a book in 5 years? No, because I know that I chose a trade-off. But I don't know that people are, confronted with this. And I don't know that people have been taught this idea. Like Thomas Sowell is so good about this.
Yeah.
It's just like you have to look at everything as trade-offs.
Everything is trade-offs. Everything is trade-offs. And also, especially on this idea of procreation, I think I'm very happy that they have all of these new procreation methods out there, allowing women maybe to have children later. It's all fine, but
it's not easy.
But it's not easy, and and you're still leaving on the table some things that are just nice to have. When you're, I'm sorry, but biology again, when your body is younger, everything
I just wrote a piece about this. I just said, like, have kids young. It was a PSA. I'm like, first of all, every year you wait is 1 year less with their grandparents if they're even still alive.
See, they don't think. We don't think.
No one thinks about this.
Think about that.
If they're even still alive and they're not going to be able to help as much, like my parents as grandparents to one of my siblings who had children young, they were like active and able, and now it's like you can't be in your 70s dealing with a 2-year-old. You're not fast enough.
You're not fast enough. And even connections.
I'm barely fast enough.
No, kids are.
I was like, if anyone's sexist, it's Mother Nature.
Nature
blame her.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, and also the thing that not even being part of the same generations, like when you're such an older mom or whatever. So again, I think at the end of the day, I think it's like that with a lot of issues. Whether it's when we're talking about the Black achievement issue in the U.S., or we're talking about this other at least perceived as this other class, which is women's class. All of this, what you have is the problem is we have been led on by those who place everything on victimhood. Those who are going to say, oh, it's not fair that as a woman, you can't have it all. Oh, it's not fair that and they come up with the craziest of things. It's not fair that people should expect. Do you know that there are these places where they say that to be civilized, to expect people to be civilized is to be racist.
Yeah.
As if Black people are not capable of being civilized.
Or being on time.
Yeah. And that 2 + 2 = 4 is racist.
Yeah.
All of this nonsense, or like Black math, diluting maths. That's the only way that Black people can take it. So you see, people like that, again, we go back to this idea of pessimism, going back into all sorts of victimhood. And I think it's just that class that has captured everything. It's the Marxist socialist ideology that has captured almost all realms of our life. Definitely our culture, the culture, all the way to identity culture. When it comes to, the disparity between different race groups in terms of their achievements, they also come in with their explanation. And so I think people have been, instead of kind of taking a step back and looking at things in the grand scheme of things and being hyper realist, we just have taken us onto this world of, the world of what I call the world of grievances. That's why the grievance studies, by the way, have caused a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Women's studies, all of that. It started out for good reasons. Yeah. But eventually it just went batshit crazy.
Yeah.
So there too we have some issues.
I mean, it's so easy to fall into that. That was again. I'm so grateful for sobriety and for having to work a program and having to really look at my part in all of the things, because it would have been very easy for me to just fall into blaming my upbringing or blaming the dysfunction or blaming. There's a lot of things that I could have blaming a lot of things that happened that were completely outside my scope, but I also was lucky enough to be a 19-year-old. I put myself in rehab after my kind of like insurance ran out, and I was the only white girl pretty much for a while in this rehab, and it was like 40 women it was state funded, so they were kind of avoiding jail. And I was in groups with them hearing their stories, and I was like, wow, I'm just spoiled. I'm very spoiled. And at the time, I didn't feel like I could share but they're like, it's all relative. So your pain is relative. Everybody has pain. That would not be the case now. I don't know that I would have been able, they probably would have been like, yeah.
No.
Don't share.
Yeah. And by the way, you probably don't belong in this ward. You need to go to this is only for black people.
Yeah. But it was like, I always joke about this, how the minute I started sharing, they'd all be like, damn, white people are fucked up.
This is why it's so good to share. Actually,
what happened in your house? That shit's crazy.
That's right.
Like, wait, I just heard a really crazy story from you, but so it made like everyone's humanity was really kind of bared. Like everyone shared to the best of their ability, but I think that experience at a very young age was really good for me.
I'm sure it was really good. But, the other thing we have to add to this, I think, has to do with, and I know everybody likes to blame social media today, but I think, the social media and the way it's designed, especially Instagram, which are things that a lot of women particularly love, and Facebook, although I don't hang out on Facebook anymore so much.
No, it's a nursing home.
It's
where you go to find out who died.
Exactly.
It's like truly a nursing home. You're
Facebook,
like, who died?
I'm like, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but Instagram, all of these places, this is where people glam themselves up, always look perfect, whatever. And people are always showcasing the cool stuff of their lives. And so but the truth is we're all going through shit, right? But if you only look at social media, you feel like you is going through shit because everything else you're seeing is like, what,
everyone's killing it.
And then it makes you then feel more. So instead of being able to, we need two things, like I think, is to be reminded of how far you've come, no matter what. Mm-hmm. And usually sharing with others can be helpful because you can be sharing about sometimes an issue. Let's say, you're complaining about, I don't know, I lost a patch of hair or whatever. But then you have a person like, oh, I wish that was, but, me, I just found out that, I don't know, cancer or whatever.
Right.
And it also helps us recalibrate things.
Right.
Because when you hear things like that, of course, you're going to start to feel like, wow, it kind of puts everything into perspective.
Yeah.
And that putting things in perspective is very helpful. So we're not doing too much of that nowadays. And beyond that, you also have this social media that makes you feel like everybody else is living the life.
Unless you're on Twitter.
Unless you're on Twitter. Twitter is another one. But yeah. So I think, yeah.
So and you talk about some of this in your book, what were your kind of darkest nights of the soul when you really felt like, how did you get through it?
Oh, my darkest night of the soul was when my first husband passed away, for sure. And I almost did not get through it. Mm-hmm. My choice was almost to join him in death. But I had really strong friends. And I also think coming from a culture where suicide is just not an option.
Yeah.
Because even with your relationship with God, those who commit suicide don't go to heaven.
Yeah.
That definitely was a big deterrent for me. Was big fear factor of like, no matter what we do, we don't do that. Although that's all I wanted to do. And so that definitely kept me sane more or less. I wouldn't say that crazy shit didn't go through my mind. I would lie if I said that. But really, it's my
community.
It's my friends.
Yeah,
it's my friends, and
you did seem to have kind of like a God
my work
awakening.
I had my friends. Definitely, I've always been a God type person.
Are you religious, or is it more just
I'm spiritual?
Like, yeah, that's where I land.
I'm spiritual. I also the people that I was working with and for in Senegal, these women whose jobs relied on my functioning or not. Mm-hmm. And when they made it clear to me, when this woman said, she's like, I can only imagine. She totally got it. And she said, but where he is right now, there is really nothing you can do for him. Mm-hmm. But she said, but for us, you can still change everything.
That moment in your book is really powerful.
Yeah. So that definitely kept me going. I could not give up on those people. And that's what I mean. That's why if you're able to see that you're better off than others, despite the fact that I had lost the love of my life, that all my dreams were shattered, dreams of kids, dreams of a family, everything shattered. Just like that. And all I wanted was to be gone. And to look at this woman and to look into her eyes. And then as I looked at her and I saw the creases in her skin and everything, each crease talked of an unspeakable misery. She probably went through losing children. And I'm the first one always to say, we never compare pain. But I firmly believe that there is no worse pain than the loss of a child.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I've never gone through it.
Yep.
But I firmly believe it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like the minute my child was born, I was like, oh, God, it's something I really wanted to avoid in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're looking across. You're looking into her eyes. And it puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that woman right there brought me back.
Yeah. Yep.
Right there brought me back. Before that, it was my friends, for sure. And the children are amazing. The children who in them carried the memory of my husband. So anyway, all of this is very cliche, but there's a reason why it's cliche. It's because it's true.
Yeah.
And so definitely my friends, but that woman, that moment, definitely I think she brought me back from the depths of despair.
Yeah.
I think that if she had let me go, I really believe that if that woman had given me the blessing, because all I was looking for in a way, I think without knowing it, I was looking for a blessing to let go of life. And she did not.
Yeah.
And in doing that, she brought me back from it all.
Yep.
And then from there on, I just kept going back up and up and up and up. But I think that's what I was looking for. I was looking for the blessing to die, probably.
Yeah.
Because if she had let go, I promise you anything you want that you would have heard that I wouldn't be here talking to you right now.
Yeah.
I would have found my way back to my new.
Oh.
And she didn't give me that blessing. If anything, she said she made it clear that there's no way, but they needed me.
Yeah.
And that made me turn around.
It's funny how powerful that is. The idea of something more than you. I always say that this is like, there have been so many times I've wanted to quit.
Yeah.
I mean, even my company, someday I'll probably write the whole story of it. It's insane. And actually there's a lot of pain around it. And it's cost me so much in my life already. And I think of like every time I'm like, I'm not fucking doing this anymore. I'm not doing this again. After I went bankrupt the first time, I get some email from somebody or they reach out and they say, your podcast saved me when I was in a dark moment. I'll get it every time. It's like a God shot. And I always say on my thing, it's like the most important reminder is that it's not about me.
Yes.
And somebody from my subscriber community, my like very rabid fan base, sent me a little plaque and it says it's not about you. And it sits right in front of me at my desk because it's like that. It is not about me. When I write, it comes through me. It's like, it's got to be more.
That's right.
It's not, and that's hard to remember when you're like algorithms and metrics and stats and followers and and it's like, no, none of this, it doesn't fucking matter. It could be 10 people.
Yeah.
And then we have such unrealistic expectations. And I feel like maybe Jordan Peterson said this and I saw a clip of it, but it's like, if you have 2,500 listeners, even though that's not many people, that's like a whole state. It's a whole stadium, like auditorium.
It's auditorium of real people.
Yeah,
of real people. And every life you were able to make better. See, this is my other dream in life. When people ask me, what's your goal in life? I don't tell them to be happy. I actually say, I don't care about being happy or not. What I care about is what Emerson wrote. He said, I want to know, by the time I die, I want to know that because I have lived, that another human being had it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I love that.
And I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you see, stuff like that also gets you out of victimhood mode.
Mm-hmm. So how do we just share these stories? This is like my passion in life, is if I can relieve somebody of the feeling that they're alone, because that feeling of isolation of being, I've been there too, lost in the depths and feeling like no one can reach out or get to you. And now I think it's even worse that we can all hide behind screens.
Yeah.
But we lost so many people in addiction in COVID. Like it's one of the, talk about like resentment and rage that comes up. You like had all these freaking bars that were opening up, but you weren't allowing in California like 10 people to get together for an AA meeting. It made me, I still get enraged.
I didn't know that.
People died.
I didn't know that.
It cost many, many lives. And they say like alcoholism is a disease of isolation, and you have all these addicts who are alone, and we will really never know like the cost of that.
Wow.
And
what a good point. It's true.
It makes me, I'm like, that's why I'm like, how can people be so forgiving in these states that were so locked down? I was like, fuck all these people. It was so terrifying to me, like the power that they had and the decisions they were making that were so clearly wrong that they kept making. And this is why I became so even more distrustful of the government than I kind of already was, and why I don't really rely on them to fix anything and come. Which brings me to what I do actually want to talk to you about before we wrap up is the like private cities. What do you call them?
I call them startup cities.
Okay.
I call them startup cities.
Private cities does sound a little bit like nefarious.
Yeah. Well, so you'll see
how
that.
do they work? Tell us about these. Because when you and I met, I'll just tell my audience, it was like this funny thing. We knew very little about each other. I knew a little bit, and I was telling you're like, so what do you do? It seems like you do a lot. And I'm like, I write and I tell jokes. And then I'm like, what do you do? You're like, well, I start cities. I was like, okay. And it's not about comparing. It's just, like, wow, I wish I had like the ability to envision myself doing something that amazing.
No, well, thank you. No, the funny thing is I tell people, I'm an entrepreneur, but, so my first company is a beverage company. My last two have been skincare company. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, and my last one is building cities. And then I'm like, wait, what? And so...
Yeah,
like, what did you say? And I'm like,
by the way, that lip gloss is amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. And so
it doesn't give you gym teacher mouth.
Thank you. See?
And you know what gym teacher mouth is.
Yes, I know. Disgusting. You're crazy.
Yes, I know.
So I mean, it was only natural. It was only normal, Bridget, because when you go back to why is my continent still the poorest region in the world, and what I think people need to understand is I didn't just wake up and decide that I wanted to do any of this stuff. What happened is, I was born in Senegal, west coast of Africa. Then when I was done breastfeeding, my parents left me behind to be in the care of my grandmother as they took the journey north to Europe in search of a job so that they could provide me with a better life back home.
How did they go north?
In their case, they were able to migrate, under safe circumstances.
Okay, good.
They, went by plane, all of that stuff. But, and that's the reason why you're asking, not everybody gets that opportunity. Mm-hmm. So many people to this day in Senegal, every week, by the way, you hear a news of, a boat that got stopped or a boat that tipped over. So people pack themselves into little fishermen's boats trying to cross over to Europe in search of a job. And oftentimes that boat tips over and then everybody at the bottom of the ocean dead, serving as fish food. That's when they're not dropping off of airplanes because somebody thought it would be a good idea to hide into a landing gear of a plane, or frozen into the cargo section of a plane because people did not know that way up there it gets super cold, you can't survive. That's when they're not being, detained in or stuck in Libya using land route, and they are being sold as slaves today, 2024.
Wow.
I'm being sold between $300 and $500. That's my price.
Who are they sold to?
They sell it to local people that are there, and maybe you go into their home and be the servant or who knows what else.
Jesus Christ.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It took for CNN to do a piece about it for people to believe what we were saying.
Yeah.
We've been saying it, but nobody believed us.
Wow.
Until CNN did a piece on it. But some of us on some WhatsApp apps, trying to, buy people's freedom back.
Oh, wow.
And so these are the stories that I grew up with, especially the boat stories. I grew up with these stories from as long as I can remember being a human with a conscience. When you're like super small, meaning. What does that do? So eventually we were lucky because my parents migrated under safe circumstances, and it was all done, legally. And so we didn't have to hide or anything like that. But, and then while all of this is happening, I'm growing up, now I first landed in Germany, then we're in France. Eventually I make myself to the US. But the constant story of my life has been these news coming from home of people who have died. Not people that I don't know, people that I know, friends of friends, family, friends, all of that stuff. And so I tell people for the most part that at my core, I am a haunted being. I'm definitely haunted. I'm haunted by those stories. And
is it like survivor's guilt?
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. Maybe the experts would call it that way. I don't know. But all I know is that it's very hard for me to enjoy much to this day. Today is better than before because today at least I feel like I'm trying to do something about it. For the longest time, I didn't know I could do something about it.
Right.
I didn't even know where to start. I just, every time I would feel a moment of joy, you would betcha that it would be followed within the next blink of a second of a blink of an eye. It would be followed by a tremendous feeling of despair, anger. You mix it all. Depression, literally.
Yeah.
It's almost like I'm this weirdo bipolar person, but it's not bipolarism.
It's like cognitive dissonance.
It's very weird. Yeah. And so the minute I start to feel good about myself, about, how hard I worked, how far I've come, feel the gratitude of all the people who've helped me on the journey. As soon as I did feel that way, to this day, as soon as I feel that way, right away, boom, the dark shadow descends on me. It's almost like the sky coming down on me. Okay, imagine the sky coming down. It's all dark and it's coming. And eventually it gets to the top of your head. You feel it and it's feeling like it's starting to suffocate you. And you feel like next moment your heart is going to explode. That's how I felt also. But that time, 10 times more when my husband passed, when I was told my husband has passed. I felt that same feeling, but in magnitude 20 million. But this is a feeling I'm very aware of. And so anyway, usually what I would do is always shove it under the rug because I didn't know what to do with this feeling. It's a very powerful feeling. It's very powerful. It's very overtaking. But this one day I was no longer able to do that. And they say that the body, the mind has an amazing capability of making sense of pretty much anything, but the body doesn't.
Yeah.
Body doesn't. Body at some point gives up and said, no, I'm not going for this. And I think that day, that's what happened. Mind separated from the body, and the body did something really jerky with my car. I almost lost the control of the car, but I parked it as soon as I could. And then when I got out and I fell on my knees, and that was it. I made a deal with God. The pain was so big. The only thing that could give me relief was to surrender. And there I surrendered. And I said, God, from here on, whatever I do, I need you to, it's going to be about every breath that you're going to grant me. I want to put it to the service of my continent. I don't know what to do though, but you're going to have to show me. But I promise you, from now on, it's no longer business as usual. And that was it. It's when things started to happen for me. And it was so it's around that time, but also, so I went on to keep on building my first company, which by the time we had raised the first round, my husband passed away after Series A. And anyway, so I kept on, and that woman kept me in the game when she said, Magatte, we need you. Where he is, you can help him, but us, you can do everything. You can change everything for us. So I went back and I fought like the devil. And that's really when I also had this motivation I didn't understand much, but I knew that jobs were important.
Right.
I started to see that. So I knew that. So very around that time is when I started becoming all about jobs, job creation in Africa. Because I could see when people had a job, they have the income that come from the job. From that income, then they can take care of their needs. They can take junior, pay the school fees. They can put food on the table, roof over their head. When you're sick, they can take you to the hospital or to the doctor. All of that stuff started to happen, right? And so, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's something that really it struck me reading your book, and it's striking me now. And it's like usually I take tons of notes, and I was really absorbed by your book. But the one word I wrote in the back of your book is dignity.
Yeah.
And there's something that the more we talk and the more I'm thinking about the way that even I was raised to think about Africa, that it's like you're stripped of your dignity when you're dependent, when you're forced into a position of dependence.
That's right.
And this really is something that you are bringing. And again, having a job, being able to provide for yourself and your family, it gives you a sense of dignity. You use that word about the woman who walked away from you after.
And she was so dignified.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I remember.
I don't think it comes from our work, but there's something about I don't know, your whole book, your whole everything, you carry yourself with such dignity. There's something very powerful and meaning about that whole word. And I think it's an important.
Because I think at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, I think whether we know what it is or what it's called or not, all of us are in it also for our dignity. I guarantee you anything you want. People can be dirt poor, but do not take their dignity away. I mean, their dignity away. It's just, it's that thing that stays. And I think for me, at the end of the day, though, it's really the one thing that humans need. No matter what, even in sickness, you want your dignity. That's why, when I had this major operation that I had a couple of years ago, I was in my hospital bed and feeling so much gratitude for these women, for these nurses who were taking care of me, because the way they were doing things for me, I never felt, although I was very much in their care, some functions had to be covered for me because, you're recovering or whatever. And they were doing they were doing this in a way that I never felt stripped of my dignity. And it's amazing how, whether in sickness, in poverty, in any of these bad moments of our lives, there's one thing that needs to remain. We want to keep our dignity.
It's so true.
Even when you're dying, I've seen people wanting to keep their dignity.
Yeah, it's funny because I always jokingly on Dumpster Fire, I'm like the olds, the poors, and I make these terms, but it's like for all the lip service that we give these populations of people, they're in situations that are not dignified. And so I'm more interested in why the situations that they find themselves are not, they're being stripped of their dignity, not because I'm saying they're poor. It's because I'm making fun of a situation where you're saying something about poverty and you're meanwhile not doing anything to actually help the situation. And oftentimes these policies make it worse, put them in a more dependent position.
That's right.
And take away their dignity. And it is something that this is the first thing dictators do.
But, absolutely. And there's a reason why. Because the minute you lost your dignity, that's it. It's almost like your humanity is gone.
There's so much of this too,
you've been dehumanized. You've been dehumanized. And there's a reason why they go for that first. Notice what they go for first. Your dignity.
Yeah. Because you're more pliable. I mean,
absolutely.
I think of how that you really you're kind of stripping yourself of your dignity. And one of the hardest things for people in recovery and early recovery at first is all of that shame that comes with what you've done or what's happened to you. And I think this is, again, why the victimhood mentality is so toxic, because it robs you.
That's right.
You can be a victim, but to attach yourself to victimhood,
that's right.
You are robbing, there's an entire generation that has been robbed of their dignity by telling them all that they're victims.
That's right.
And it's, again, the more sinister side of things, I guess, would say, well, they're more
controllable.
Yeah.
Controllable. Oh, there's a whole, it all makes sense when you start to pay attention. It
Yeah.
all makes sense. And that's why, that's oftentimes, that's what they'll do. You know all it is when they say they break you, when they break you, that's all it is. When somebody is breaking you, they're taking away your dignity. Grabbing, as a man, will grab your wife and, I don't know, they rape her in front of you. That's all they're doing. It's in a way breaking. When you say breaking somebody,
Even
that's
like
what
the
it is.
masks and the 6 feet apart and all this,
All
like
of it.
little subtle stuff during COVID felt so undignified.
So we're taking your dignity away, and once you have it, once it's
Dying
gone,
alone, like don't
that
even
part to
fucking
me-
get me started
That part
on
to
that.
me,
I know.
that part to me was just like, you got to be kidding me. But that's how it is. And so once you have gotten a person to that level, you pretty much own them.
Yeah.
And that's why I hate. That's why I despise victimhood with everything that I've got. Because victimhood, victimizing somebody and allowing somebody to live in victimhood, that's why I've got a huge problem with a certain strain of psychology and all of these places where they just, feed you more fat and sugar, which I call victimhood. It's just, once you're there, you have lost your humanity. And from there,
And it's hard to get out.
it's hard to get out.
Yep.
It's hard to get out. And that's the one thing. It just keeps us on this weird side. So that's for me why dignity matters so much. And when people are not able to provide for themselves, that's one of the first things that they lose. I think all of us, it's okay, but at some point in our life, it's okay. We will fall, we will be down on our luck. That's just nature, that's just life.
Yeah.
Ups, downs, ups, downs.
Yeah.
But what is never was meant to be was to be in a chronic, chronic poverty or chronic, like it to become a way of life.
Yeah.
So, you can be down. Let's say you just got assaulted or whatever. I can understand your first reaction is, haul up and feeling sorry for yourself and all the things that come with it. But you can't stay in that place. Staying in that place is in a way the death of you. And it's just not, it's just not a good place. And so at some point you got to start to really get yourself out of that. And that's why a friend of mine said, no matter what happened to you, you're responsible for what you do for you. And at some point, it's okay to when you fall, it's okay to cry for a moment. It's okay to feel the hurt. It's okay, all of that. But at some point, you got to get back.
Yeah.
Failure to do that means you'll never do it.
Yeah.
And I think even Jordan Peterson said something. I was shocked I didn't know that. He said, if your child is not civilized, I don't know if it's a right word he used, if by 4 you haven't taught your child.
I was at this.
Were you there?
Yeah,
I was shocked.
I was.
He
I
said,
went to. It was when he was in Austin.
Yes.
Did you
just
go
a
see
few
him?
weeks ago? Yeah.
Yeah.
He said psychopaths.
Yeah. You pretty much can't recover.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So that to me is the danger also of falling into victimhood and staying there.
Yeah.
And staying there. And that's why I have so little patience for people who promote victimhood.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and it
It's
doesn't.
so toxic.
It's very toxic. And, but then I also have an issue sometimes with people who say, oh, just pull yourself up by the bootstrap, you damn
Right.
it. So Glenn Lowry and Ian Rowe, I love those guys. I really love those guys. Don't take me wrong. Even Thomas Sowell, big fan. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm like, but I don't like that part of put yourself up by the bootstrap. I think sometimes people need for you to dive down there with them.
Yeah.
Dive down there with them. Offer a hand, whatever it is. Jump on my back, whatever it is. I
Yeah.
understand you can't swim from the bottom of a pool to the top of a pool, but I will take you there. And eventually they're hanging tight on your back. That's how I imagine, because
Yeah.
I've been in these situations.
Yes.
I've been in a situation like that where I felt like I just can't. I can't go there.
Yeah.
Let me to die here.
Yeah.
But then, literally I would feel this person saying, hop on my back. I got you. And then we start walking. All of a sudden, I'm the one who says, hey, can I step down? And I step out and I get to the side and then I feel like walking to the side. I mean, if I had to put it in an image, sometimes we
Yeah.
have to do that. And so sometimes if it's too hard, this is where, sometimes when you and I were saying, I feel like the left doesn't get it because for them, it's like, it's victimhood all the time. But then the right is always like, put yourself up by the bootstrap all the time. I'm like, guys, come on.
Yeah, there's something interesting too, and like that going back to they don't know what computers are, and this is like a weird thing about capitalism in some ways is that, and it's also very American. If you're if you're rich, you're smart. And if you're poor, you're stupid. And this is something that bothers me. I'm like, I actually love what Sam Harris says about all this stuff, where like this kind of idea of a self-made man is a little bit BS because it's dependent on where you were born.
So many factors.
Like what country you were born. Yeah, so many factors. And the fact that I don't have a brain aneurysm right now is a miracle. It's just so many things can go wrong. And so I do think you have to find that balance. And it is uniquely American because, as we were talking, the kind of, is it a perfect system? No. Is it the best system? Probably.
Right.
I had a mentor and a business advisor who used to say, there's not really a word in other countries for it's earning money.
Yeah.
But in America, you make money. It's like something that appears out of the ether.
Out of nowhere,
And it's not a way you would describe it in other countries. In America, we make money because it is a very capitalist, like, we can make things out of thin air and make and he was kind of pointing even to my subscribers. He's like, this is something you're making money. You're making this out of, you're creating things.
You're creating things. Yeah.
It gives you that we have a very specific idea about money. And I was talking to a lot of Brits when I was at the Dissident Dialogues event, and they were talking about how this like weird relationship Americans have with people who are wealthy and how we'll kind of exonerate them of anything if they're rich, and how we look up to them and think that they're somehow smart. And if you're wealthy because you did one thing, you suddenly know about all things, and if you're poor, you don't know about computers.
That's just the most ridiculous thing. But that's why, going back to that, and the question you asked me earlier, again, Africa is has the youngest population in the world. Average age is 19. By 2050, 1 out of every 4 people walking the earth will be African.
Wow.
The future is going to be African, whether we like it or not. Now, what type of future is going to look like is going to depend very much on what we do now.
And the West is aging, right? For the most part?
Completely aging.
Yeah.
Aging, not that replacement rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very scary. So in this case, what needs to be done? So poverty falls solved by prosperity built by entrepreneurs. What do entrepreneurs need? An enabling business environment. That's just the secret sauce right there. The humans have everything else that's needed. Whether you're African, you're American, you're human, you got the rest of the recipe, right? By just being a human being. But you need that environment in order to thrive.
Yeah.
So in our case, many people have been involved in reforms, and policy reforms. I certainly wear such a hat as, a senior fellow for the Atlas Network, which is the largest organization of free market think tanks in the world. So, there it's all about working with our think tanks based in Africa to work on policy reforms so that it can become easier for entrepreneurs to enterprise.
Right.
But as you and I know, piecemeal legislation and these reforms take a lot of time. By the time you're done getting rid of one over here.
It's like leadership changes and...
It's a mess.
Yeah.
It's a mess. So eventually we're thinking, and meanwhile, I've got millions of young Africans coming to age of work every single year with no hope for a decent job that can provide them for building that life. And we all know that there's nothing more dangerous than young people, especially young men, with no hope to build the future.
Right.
They just go for chaos and destruction.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. And so in this case, I'm thinking we got to become more radical because we got to go faster. Something has to happen in a big way fast.
Yep.
Because there's no way we're going to contain. There's no way. Because if these kids can't find jobs where they are, they're going to start also to migrate other places.
They are.
And that's what they're doing right now. And they're doing what they should be doing.
Yeah.
America is made of immigrants.
Yep.
When you're not happy or when it's not happening for you where you are, you owe it to yourself to migrate and go find another place where to make this happen.
Americans do it in America.
That's right. That's what I'm saying.
Like,
all the time. The
California.
States will always me with you.
Yeah.
The same thing. So that's my point. This is a normal thing to do. So to expect this idea of expecting that people should be staying where they are just because, oh, that's where you were born, that is so hypocritical for
Right.
some people to say. Whether you're European or you're American, eventually you got to build up your nations, that's great. But then all of a sudden think that you can close borders for others to come. I think you're going to have to come up with better than borders or no borders. You're going to have to come with something that has nothing to do with any of that stuff, something that has to do with how do we help people be able to stay at home.
Right.
If that's what they want to do. How can we get to the point where people migrate no longer because of hunger, but because of taste? That's why you migrate today. That's why I migrate. We migrate for those reasons. Oh, I like here better, or I like there better.
Right.
Yeah, we have our taxes and everything, but seriously, living in California, living in Austin, we have a taxes thing or whatever, but nothing that's life or death situation. Or if
Right.
you're in California, you can't provide for your family or anything like that. It's just betterment, of some kind.
It's a little life or death in California.
We're getting there. Yeah, I know. As I was saying that, I'm like, Magatte, that's a bad example, especially nowadays.
I don't know.
Yeah, I was like, no, just dump California because we're definitely getting there. Literally, people are getting killed over there. But in any case, so that's why we had to think about a solution that would be so much more radical and get us there faster. And this is why I started to pay more and more attention to this concept of startup cities. I call them startup cities. Many people know them as charter cities. So the best way to think of them is these are next generation special economic zones that have their own law and their own governance when it comes to business. So you don't touch immigration law or family law or defense law or anything like that, because that's a privy of a sovereign nation, right? But on the business side, because we said a business friendly environment is what's needed, meaning a free market environment is what's needed for the wealth creators, aka entrepreneurs, to do their magic, aka enterprise, right? Because for me, entrepreneurship is like what you were saying.
Right.
It's the magic of creating something out of nothing.
Right.
Right, when you're going back. So for those guys to be able to do their work, they need this business-friendly environment. Except that when you look at all of these indexes, economic indexes that look at how easy or hard it is to start a business, like I was saying earlier, you find that it is harder to do business almost in anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa than it is anywhere in Scandinavia.
Right.
So even people who are like anti-business, like Bernie Sanders and who knows what else, they're the first one to use Scandinavia as an example. Well, I'm here to tell Bernie Sanders, Scandinavia is way more capitalist than most sub-Saharan African nations.
Yeah.
How about that, dude?
Yeah.
So that is what needs to change, right? I mean, Bernie Sanders gets on my nerves. But anyway, and I will not cut him a slack just because supposedly he's got good intentions.
Yeah.
I'm even doubting those good intentions, by the way. But because by now he should know better. So in any case, so this is why I started to pay attention to the startup cities, right? And realize, and then you look around you and people are like, oh, startup cities, what is that? Where have you seen those? Well, there are examples everywhere in a way, more or less, like old versions of startup cities. Singapore is one of them. When Lee Kuan Yew, looked around when they got their independences and being like, oh my God, we just got separated from the main country that they were part of back then, and they're just like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Eventually, he said, he looked around and he realized the free market is definitely the way forward, to build wealth, and eventually, started with all of these very very ambitious sets of reforms. They went on a reform journey like no other. And fast forward, Singapore is what you have today. Dubai, same thing. Dubai realizing that, on this 110 acres of land that they used for the Dubai International Financial Center, they decided that if we want to be a top financial center in the world, they looked around at all the the best performing ones. You're looking at New York, you're looking at London, and what do they have all in common? Common law. And so they not only stopped there, they said, okay, we're going to hire, because very pragmatic, we're going to hire retired British common law judges from Britain to come here and educate the law. And so just kind of changing everything when it comes to the business laws and just making it so easy that these people, the investors, and whether it's Citibank or whatever of these companies that they're trying to attract, for you, whether you're doing business in Dubai or London or New York, it's the same thing. You're going to be judged by the same judges. You're going to be judged by the same thing.
Still can't drink in Dubai, but
well,
yeah,
that's although yes, and but nobody forces the investors to go there,
right?
And so that's what it is. And obviously it's working for them.
Right.
And that's why I think it's important to not take everything from, to just say we're going to copy paste. I guess they have their own culture and they're like, yeah, here we don't want certain things,
right,
but everything else they kind of put it. And that's also what I like to tell people. You can really, truly apply free market capitalism to pretty much any type of society that you want. The Chinese, with their commie ways, China had to implant, like zones of radical free market areas, which are the SEZs, the special economic zones of China. That's really all it is. So them too are examples of startup cities.
Right.
Zones in which you're recognizing that what the rest of the country is running on when it comes to business is probably not proper for prosperity building. So you're saying in this piece of land, we are going to apply a different set of laws when it comes to business. And let's see what happens. And every time it's been tried, the magic happens. Right. And what I love about that is, again, you can be like Dubai, where you say people can't drink or whatever, but it's happening. You can transplant it on any type of society. But when it comes to business, you just be able to tell people these are the rules these are the laws of a business.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're doing there. And so far, I've been talking to, right now, I'm at 9 countries in Africa that I'm talking to, out of which 3 are very, very promising. Not that the other ones are not, but 3 are very close to, I think something is gonna.
So you just find a plot of land and build a city?
Okay.
Is there a military? Like, how does this work logistically?
Yeah. No, the way it works more very well. So first of all, you have a set of criteria that you go by in order to look at, to decide which country to try to go for. So ideally, you always try to go with a country that's not too landlocked, for obvious reasons. You also try to go, in our case, for small countries, because a large country, you can imagine how complicated everything becomes. Mm-hmm. And within that, and then you also look at the political situation of that country. How long has the person who is in charge has been in charge? Is it democracy, no democracy? And as a matter of fact, you'll find that it doesn't really matter whether it's a democracy or not, or something in between, or hybrid or whatever. What matters is that if the leader has a vision of something different.
Right.
Because it's not like, we can just go somewhere and say, oh, there's a little piece of land here, and we're going to come here and put a little flag, and these are our rules. No.
What's your flag?
Yeah, no, that stuff is not, that time is gone. And so here you come in, and so you have all of these different criterias that you take a look at: the political situation, the people in charge, which are they in their first mandate, second mandate, how long is the term, if their second mandate, who might win next time, all of that stuff. So you start looking at all of these things, and eventually you start to decide which countries seem like very much an option. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you're the one who reaches out to the country, sometimes they reach out to you.
Okay.
Right? And so what happens is, when you go and sit with you don't really deal with even everybody in the government, you deal with what you call the ambassadors / the people who are going to champion this idea.
Right.
But more than not, more often than not, you're going to need to make sure that the president is on board.
Okay.
Sometimes the president or the PM, depending on how the country works and who is really in charge. Right. There are some countries where you have a president, but the president is a figurehead. The PM is the one who is the real government chief.
Right.
So what you do is then you work with this government to show them. Oftentimes, what we do, many of the governments you'll find have what they call a vision plan for the next 25 years, the next 35 years. So the first thing we do is kind of look at what is that vision plan of the government of this country.
Tell them how it's wrong.
Well, not so much. But first of all, we want to make sure that we're talking to people who at least have a vision of getting somewhere.
Right.
Right. Some people might not be interested in that, so you don't even go there. But some nations you'll see are telling you, we want to become a well-to-do nation.
Right.
A middle-income nation by X years.
Right.
And some of them are also very explicit in saying, and we're going to do it through creating better business environments to build companies that create jobs and the middle class. Mm-hmm. So when you see things like that, and you know that this leader has what it takes, then you have these discussions, and then from there you show them how Prospera, the platform, can really help them accelerate these plans, these goals. So you see how you come in and you mesh with
Yeah.
what they're going for. So no question of, oh, we know better,
Right.
you jerks or whatever. No, it's like we read where you're trying to go. You spent a lot of time building vision plan, and we obviously also buy into this, and let us share with you how we can help accelerate what you're doing. Right?
Okay.
And then we come in and we kind of explain all of these different things and what it's going to take for. And then at that point, you start to look at the discrepancy of what the platform would need, our platform, to be optimized versus what it is that they have currently going on right now. For example, is your nation, first of all, running on common law or not, or a variation of different type of laws? And making it clear that this zone is going to have to be in common law. So no matter
Right.
what else you're doing over here, this is going to have to be common law if you're very serious about providing a world-class business environment,
fascinating.
right? And then from there, you'll be like, okay, and do we also have the opportunity to build our own tax system? And some of them might be like, absolutely no way, our constitution will never let us do that. And some of them might be like, yeah, in our constitution, we have this clause that say we are allowed to have experiment zones.
Okay.
And stuff like this can fall into it. Then you're like, okay, what about the currency? What about the currency? And then they'll say, well, our central bank, as a matter of fact, some of them will tell you central bank absolutely does not want you to touch this. And then we'll have to see what else we can do. But ideally, we like for these cities to be able to run on Bitcoin because we believe it's a more sound currency and all that stuff. But the good news is you get to choose which one you can use. So it's like that about everything. It's like, but also, can we have reciprocity in terms of arbitration law? And can we install choice of law? And can we have regulatory choice? Right? All of these things, you start to work with them, and so you have to start to look at what the Constitution is saying. You have to look at the treaties that they have signed into, the international treaties, because as you know, international treaties take precedent over your Constitution. That's
Right.
why today many EU nations. That's why in the EU, probably the EU Parliament is going for elections on June 9th, so a few days from now. And I wouldn't be surprised that it's all of these, extreme right-wing, parties that get elected across the board. And then once they all get elected, at some point they'll be more or less in power at the EU level. And there they can start. And some of them, what they want to do is they want to start to deconstruct the fact that the EU has taken over
Right.
when it comes to immigration policies. So France can catch somebody and want to send them back, but if the EU judge says no way, then they have to keep them on.
Right.
So you see how there, all of a sudden, it's almost like you have lost your sovereignty
Right.
to the greater alliance
Yeah.
you have signed into. So that's why here you not only have to deal with the constitution of a nation for some of this stuff and make sure that it's in line and that nobody is going to do something unconstitutional. And if something needs to happen, but only it has to happen through the constitution, then you get to find out, okay, what type of votes does it need to go through? Is it going to be a referendum? But it has to go through for this to be voted for, because we need this in order for our work to really work.
Right.
So we work all of this stuff, but you don't just stop at the constitution. You have to also look at the treaties that they signed into. Which ones they have signed. It's crazy.
This is like the craziest shit.
It's very crazy. And the best way I try to explain people what we're doing is, you see, when you look at X or you're looking at Facebook or you're looking at any algorithm at any company like that you're looking at, what you see is X. You go in there, boom, 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 I type my thing, it does my thing, I did DMs, I quote tweet, whatever, it's all happening. What you don't see, so it's the same thing with the country. Everything is ruled, if it's not ruled by the laws of, if it's not usually ruled by the laws of physics and math, it's ruled by the law of man, legislation and law, right? So there's a reason why even even that seatbelt you have in your car, by now it's law.
Yeah.
It's there because of law. There's probably many different laws that you don't know of, even where your flips switches in the house are.
Yeah.
It's by law.
Yeah.
Did you know that even the door, there's a reason why doors open from one side to another and not the other way around? It's legislation.
Yeah.
And if you try to do something different, you build your home like that and you have to pass inspection,
Yeah.
you won't pass inspection.
Yeah, it's
so
all these
almost
levels.
every aspect of our life is ruled by a law. And so, but the problem we have is most people don't, the problem we have is the issue here with these people not being able to self-actualize is all due to the law, for the most part, in these countries at least. And the problem is, law is invisible to most people.
Right.
Just like this air we breathe, but without it, you and I can't be here.
Gravity.
It's exactly all of that gravity, all of these things. It's invisible to most people, but it's very real. So here, when you look at X, voila, you're doing your thing. But behind this window, there is millions of lines of code.
Yeah.
And law is that too. It's literally millions of lines of code.
Yeah.
You know that right now, for example, in France, for when it comes to house buildings or infrastructure building, especially housing, do you know how many laws there are to be compliant for when you're building a home? 6,000.
Yeah, I had a friend who's really good friend just rebuilt a place there and said it was a nightmare.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare. And then they wonder why France is basically running out of housing.
I think Austin just voted to like loosen up some of the
My
housing.
friend Nicole Nodsek, I have to give her big kudos with Texans for Reasonable Solutions.
Yeah.
Those guys are doing the Lord's work.
Yeah.
Lord's work. And so I would like to take this opportunity to
shout her out.
Shout them out. Everybody got to go support them, Texans for Reasonable Solutions, and they're the ones who got us this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just amazed, and I'm in awe with my friend Nicole.
Yeah.
So great job they're doing. I even had to go to City Hall to
she should
to
come
do
on
my
the
voice.
podcast.
I want her to, but
Yeah.
she's so discreet. You'll be lucky.
Okay.
But you guys, that's where we're
That
talking
makes
about
sense.
introducing.
Okay.
So we'll meet with her. And so anyway, so you see how the laws, how you put so many laws, people have to jump through hoops. It also costs a lot of money and time. Then it means you're going to have less supply because less people are going to want to do that. It's the same thing with us. These laws are killing us. There are too many of them, and they're too senseless. So what it means is just like with the housing supply, you have less housing supply, then you're going to have less people doing business.
Right.
Less people doing business means less companies means less jobs means less people with income. Less people with income means more people in poverty.
Right.
It's just that. So in this case, when you think about X, you look at it, you don't see the millions of lines of codes behind it. The law is the same thing. So in this case, what we have to do is just like when Elon came, in this case, he said he fired all of his people and they proceeded to try to clean things up. Where us, it's just, it doesn't work so easily because it's just everything is so messed up. You know how sometimes the home is so messed up, you have to take it down and start over?
He still says he might have to do that with
He might
Twitter.
have to do that because you spend so much time.
My account has been literally flatlined for a year since he took over.
Yeah.
Just
Many
flatlined.
of us.
And I'm like, bro, your code is fucked up.
It's fucked up.
Yeah.
It's fucked up. And so, and at some point, because for you to take the time to try to go through these millions of lines of codes to see where's this problem, but then you realize that this line is attached to that line, is attached to this thing. It's a mess. It's a mess. So what you do is you clean everything up, erase, and then you proceed to rewrite the code. And you use that opportunity to design the best code possible. Mm-hmm. And beautiful code, as we all know, is simple code also. Mm-hmm. So what we do in these zones is we kind of try to keep the code as clean as possible. We don't try to put all of our bells or whistles into the code. You actually, and the bells and whistles, so you keep the laws and the regulations very clean, right? Baseline. Because we're not Far West, and it's not like any man for themselves or whatever. There is a minimum of understanding among all of us. So you keep a line of code very simple, very few lines. At a level like that, you're talking about, few thousands of lines of codes, or maybe in the 10,000s rather than millions of lines of code.
Right.
It's still a lot of cleaning. And then what you do is for all of your special things that you would like to have, instead of saying, we want to make sure that if you pass by the front of my home and you fall, you're going to have to, pay this, you're going to have to pay that. Try to put that into law. Instead, we rely on liability insurance, right?
Okay.
To do those things. So when you pass a contract commercial contract between us, then it's in that contract that we can put all the stuff we want, and then we let the insurance become the referee, rather than trying to get to the judge to become the referee.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, I feel like it makes sense. It's just, I don't fully understand how insurance seems so complicated to me in general. So I don't know how that would simplify things, but.
They simplify because they're the ones who do the job. You see, so insurance companies, it is in their best interest to really be close to everything. Like those guys, they have to stay on top of everything.
Right.
Because you, for example, you can't mess your car up and go and tell them, oh, somebody rear-ended me or whatever.
Right.
And if you, so when you look at, it's preferable to let them be in charge. Like if you and I enter a contract through that liability insurance, they have to put all types in place in order to make sure that things are going to work out.
Right.
And if they make it too complicated, we're probably not going to sign up with them.
Right.
And we're going to go find out, because the market works so well, another insurer is going to be like, well, you're being a jerk with people. You make no sense, like in these senseless laws. So we are going to create something simpler so people can come and sign up easier. So you let the market take care of that, but it will be taken care of. Where if you try to do that through and they more than any government can do that better.
Yeah. They're like leaving places like Florida and California in droves.
That's right. That's right.
What happens if they all just leave?
Well, because California is going to have to get its act together. California is making it impossible for them to do business.
Right.
So where you go in, so you see that you're giving me a great example. The laws are so much simpler and easier in Texas and in Florida.
Right.
Where in California, the state is still trying to control everything. It's not even letting them do their job of being insurers.
Right.
It's telling them how to do their job of being insurers and putting all types of rules and regulations in the way.
Okay.
Where if you, trust me, insurance are not here to lose your money.
Right.
To lose their money. And you are not there also. You see, when you're trying to sign up for an insurance company, you're doing your homework. You're looking at which one is going to, and then you look at exactly the one who fits your situation.
Right.
If you were looking at healthcare insurance, you know that, for example, if it's not
like the
an obligation
versus the payment,
an obligation, younger people would decide not to have maybe an insurance, or if they're going to have an insurance plan,
it'll be
they have a high deductible,
Yeah.
and they have because they know that traditionally they'll probably not get that. I mean, we're talking about statistics now.
Yeah.
People have to understand statistics. People are going to get sick and all that. That's true, but as a whole, we know that young people fall sick less often and less bad. So that's why a young person also knows that and will usually choose a high deductible. But as they get older or have a family, then they start to reassess their situation and go for a different type of insurance. But you see, all of this is happening through the market, and you also making your own decisions and going to the provider that fits you the best. And they too have done their homework to know if you're going to be a good, insuree or not.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where we're saying leave that to the market and to the liability insurance, to do that. They do it better than any state could do it. And if you let those two operate like that.
Okay.
The people in them. And so these are all the things that we kind of do there. And also you can sue us. I mean, that's the other thing. See, when you're dealing with a state, and let's say with what was happening with lead, when they discovered lead and it was causing tremendous, brain damage in children. When the industry discovered that, guess what? It's the union workers in Chicago who basically blocked the way for the longest time. And we didn't get to plastic, pipes for the longest time because they figured it would be making them more money to use lead pipes than to switch to plastic pipes. If you had an insurance in between of that, instead of just the law says we can still use lead.
Yeah.
Rather than lead, plastic, we don't decide on anything. We, the state, it's none of our business. We don't get involved in what gets built how. You build and the builder, cover your ass with your liability insurance.
Okay.
You're going to go there and you're going to do that. Well, guess what? If it was proven, if it comes out that lead pipes are bad for people, and you're running it one day more and somebody gets sick, they sue you.
Right.
And you're gonna pay.
Right.
They not only in this case the insurance would have to turn around and pay, and then they don't want to be in situations like that.
Right.
And at the same time, so you have the ability to sue. You sue. Where if it was just it's in the law, because as long as the law says no more lead pipes, if somebody's using lead pipes and somebody dies, who do you sue?
Yeah.
Because it's in the law says it's you can do it. You see how in a situation like that, because it was a state controlled, we are still using lead pipes when we already know lead pipes are no good. The research has popped up,
like Flint.
And exactly.
Yeah.
And it also delayed the adoption of a better technology.
Yeah.
You see, if all of this has happened in the private realm and refereed by the liability insurance, then it's a whole nother ball game. We would have let pipe go away faster and adopted plastic pipes earlier. And anybody who has been messed up with in between can turn around and sue us in this case, because we're not the state. Prospera, this city, is not managed by the state. The state gave us the mandate, but it's us. Now they can sue us. How often can you sue the government and even win? So better.
I have to ask you our last two questions.
Sure.
I want to hear more about this, but I think we have to wrap it up. And everyone needs to read your book, because it's like completely fascinating to me that how this all works, and I feel like I need to see it. I want to see how it.
That's when
what's the best? Where can someone get a good window into this? A good. Where if they want to learn more about how this works, where can they go?
Yeah. Right now, you can go to the website called prospera.hn, as in Honduras. And then, that's the thing. I think you should also have Eric Berman on your show, because he's our CEO, my co-founder for Prospera Africa. Yeah. He's also coming he's coming to Austin on the week of June 10th. Yeah, so I'll make sure we organize that, because it's fascinating. And with him, you can totally geek out because I think once people hear it, it makes so much sense. Yeah. But I think we're so stuck at the point where, at the level where we think that law is the garden, garden terrain of the state. Yeah. And I argue that the more you kick the state out of it, the better you and I will do what we need to do. Yeah. And so Eric Berman will be here on the week of June 10th, and definitely let's make sure we organize that with you and him. But Prospera.hn, and you can follow my Substack, my social media, Magatte W, and my Substack is Magatte Wade. The Substack. We talk more about these things, and the problem with the nature of what we do is it's really hard to speak about it before we have finalized certain things. Yeah. Because you can only imagine. Yeah. But that's where you can find out a lot of things, and I'm going to try to make sure that we can get to talk about these things much more. Yeah. And that's why, in a way, I'm also, happy to be talking to you, because
you can I think more come people. Back too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
What's your biggest defective character?
Defective character. Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson, I would say.
What do you mean?
I think he just has in him all the things that we don't want to be. I personally don't want to be. Yeah. But at the same time,
do you struggle with those things? Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of sloth.
We have these different things, and then Homer just being I don't know. There's something about Homer, and I think what I like the most about Homer is turning vulnerability into just like something more like laughable. I don't know if it's just because he's a cartoon. I don't know, but Homer Simpson is the first person who comes to me.
What's your biggest asset? I think defective character. I meant like, what's your kind of thing that you like, your own personal defect?
Still
Homer Simpson. Okay, I'm just making sure that.
Homer Simpson. Still Homer
not
Simpson.
Being confusing. Yeah.
No. I had to think about what you were trying to say, but I think I landed on the right definition.
I totally do.
Yeah. So Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson.
What's your biggest asset?
And my biggest asset, I am. My biggest asset is, I still dream. I still dream. Some people might think it's cuckoo, whatever, but I still dream. And most importantly, I try to act on my dreams.
I love that. That's a perfect place to end. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you to you.
The check-in with Bridget and Cousin Maggie can now be found at Phetasy.com. It's been titled Another Round with Bridget Phetasy, and it's now in video.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.